After a decade of effort and billions in R&D, Apple has decided to scrap its electric vehicle efforts and move much of that team to generative AI. Welcome back to the AI Breakdown. Big news out of Cupertino, California today, as Apple has apparently canceled its electric car project, a decade-long effort, and is shifting resources to mainstreaming its Vision Pro headset, as well as, you guessed it, artificial intelligence. So for those who haven't been paying attention to Apple's electric car efforts, the initiative was known as Project Titan, and it came from the idea that effectively the car is the ultimate mobile product. If Apple was in the business of mobile products, then maybe an electric vehicle could be its next big thing. Part of it was driven also by a concern that at some point the phone market was going to be saturated and was going to be able to account for less and less growth. Globally speaking, the iPhone still makes up about half of Apple's sales. Now, Project Titan was never actually confirmed by Apple, and the news that they've canceled this effort, which was reported first by Bloomberg, has not been confirmed either. There are a bunch of dimensions of this story which are really interesting. Many of them are inside Apple and what it means for their generative AI efforts, which we'll get into in just a moment. But there is also part of the story which we have to tell, which has to do with the struggling EV industry. The Financial Times, for example, writes, "The cancellation comes as the EV industry has slowed in recent months. In January, Tesla warned that flagging demand, high interest rates, and intensifying competition would lead to slower sales growth rates this year. Ford and General Motors have paused plans to expand their EV manufacturing in recent months, and last week, Rivian announced that it would cut 10% of its workforce and keep deliveries flat this year." So where did this reporting come from if it wasn't confirmed by Apple? It was, of course, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who is one of the industry's best-known Apple watchers. Gurman wrote yesterday, "Apple is canceling a decade-long effort to build an electric car, according to people with knowledge of the matter, abandoning one of the most ambitious projects in the history of the company. Apple made the disclosure internally Tuesday, surprising the nearly 2,000 employees working on the project. The decision was shared by Chief Operating Officer Jeff Williams and Kevin Lynch, a vice president in charge of the effort. The two executives told staffers that the project will begin winding down and that many employees on the car team, known as the Special Projects Group or SPG, will be shifted to the Artificial Intelligence Division. Those employees will focus on generative AI projects, an increasingly key priority for the company." Elon Musk, of course the CEO of Tesla, retweeted the news with a salute emoji and a cigarette emoji, perhaps conveying a recognition of how hard this market is. Now, when it comes to the question of investor reactions, one might have thought that this would be seen as a sign of weakness. Apple is not generally in the business of canceling big ambitious projects. However, the reaction has been exactly the opposite. Shares were up about 1% after the news broke yesterday, and many analysts were unequivocal in their support for the decision. Wedbush analyst Dan Ives writes, "Apple has canceled its decade-long effort to build an EV. The writing was on the wall for Apple with a much different EV landscape forming that would have made this an uphill battle. Most of these Project Titan engineers now all focused on AI at Apple, which is the right move." He also said that it's a strategic move that they applaud loudly. Baker Avenue Wealth Management's King Lip said, "As an Apple shareholder, it's music to our ears."
What do you make of this report? Market seems to like it. Do you?
Hi, Scott. Yeah, I would say as a Apple shareholder, it's music to our ears, frankly, that the company is terminating the car project. We were honestly never big fans of the car project. I mean, building a car is capital intensive. It's a low margin. There's serious entrenched players already in the EV market. So now that the company's, officially dedicating more resources, it's something that as a shareholder, we were always kind of wondering how committed is Apple to their generative AI, and it looks like they're committing some serious resources to it.
Let me ask you this. Given the installed base, I mean, we're pretty much a product company, first and foremost. Software, I get it. How big do they need to be in AI to make a shareholder like you happy?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of the generative AI is going to be built into their operating system, into the Macs. It's going to be built into the iPhone software, for example. And as we know, there's a couple of billion devices, active devices that Apple has. So the consumer distribution for Apple is probably second to none, from that perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
So in that little clip, you really have the two sides of this discussion. On the one hand, a concern from shareholders about the EV market and how good it was to enter in the first place. And on the other, a concern that has been lingering that Apple wasn't focused enough on generative AI. Now, of course, this has been something that we've talked about numerous times here. that Apple's absence from this space, as really the only big tech company to be absent from the space, has been extremely notable. The market has widely been willing to give them a pass, given Apple's propensity to do things not first but best, but even that was having its limits, and I think the response of the market to this news is indication that people were starting to get a little bit concerned around when Apple's AI strategy was really going to ramp up. Now, in a further analysis piece, Mark Gurman again from Bloomberg wrote, Apple's future isn't going to hinge on selling $100,000 cars with self-driving features. Instead, it will focus on catching up with rivals in the generative AI industry, where chatbots from OpenAI and Google have captured the imagination of consumers and investors. Bloomberg intelligence analyst said shifting resources towards generative AI is the right call, quote, given the long-term profitability potential of AI revenue streams versus cars. Gurman also points out that self-driving car efforts are AI efforts, something that Elon Musk has talked about frequently. He writes, Apple's decade-long car effort was also an AI challenge in itself. Apple attempted to build an artificial intelligence system that was powerful and energy efficient enough to make a car fully autonomous. With that off the table, Apple can concentrate on applying AI to its current products, including the iPhone and the iPad, and avoid falling further behind tech peers. So, when should we start to actually hear more about what Apple is going to do in AI? There are a couple moments that people are watching for this year. First is that its WWDC conference will happen in June, and it's anticipated that Apple will reveal a set of new AI capabilities for their software there. And it is also widely reported that the first AI features will be rolled out in iOS 18, which is slated to be released around September with the next generation of the iPhone. This will be, of course, a jarring shift for those 2,000 engineers who have been working on this project for years. But as someone in the AI space who's excited to see what Apple can do and how much they can bring actually useful integrated tools into the platforms that we already use, I can't say I'm not excited to see how this supercharges their efforts. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's AI Breakdown. Until next time, peace.